Oh yeah, everybody.
I think we should start, like, if you guys maybe play an instrument or you sing, I think we should start.
I have a flute from the fourth grade.
I have
only
one
play
too.
badly.
Oh, we have a bunch of flautists here. Okay, we'll all play the flute.
Yeah, we could have different Feedback Friday songs as we come in. So,
I wonder if we have a guitar. We might have a guitar somewhere.
or like
I have one right over here.
yeah. I mean, I'm just inviting you all to really be more creative with this. We're sick. Kathy and I are sick of it. That we have
That we have to hum along.
like curate this thing. And, you know,
Oh yeah, here's some bells. We could have
Bells going here.
we could do like this little like carillon thing, you know. Beep 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 beep. Do water glasses, blow over the tops of
Somebody
bottles.
has like a theremin. Let's get weird with this.
Yeah. Do you guys all know who Harry Parch is?
Yeah.
He was this musician, I think maybe in the 50s or 60s, but he was just creating instruments out of anything. And when I was in
he
high
the one
school,
who made
the cloud thing, and it's like
Yeah.
housed in somewhere in New Jersey, he made
Yeah.
this cloud orchestra made out of, I think they were 5-gallon glass bottle jugs, and he cut them to different, you know, so they were like bells, and you could play them like bells. And so when I was in high school, we had like this crazy music teacher, and he loved John Cage and Harry Parch, and
Oh, cool.
we just listened to all that and tried to make our own. It wasn't called an orchestra. Was it? I can't remember what it was called, but we all made our own instruments, and we played these compositions that we all created. It was wild. This is what happens when you're like born in California. Kind of, you know, right around that moment of maximum crazy creativity.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. He just let us do, you know, because then music became everything, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
you know, I'd learned how to like play the flute in a little orchestra, but this was nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Nothing. All right, how are we doing here? We're on record,
We're just
and we have a few people coming in, but
Yeah.
kazoos. Bree says
Bruce said
Ooh, I can do a kazoo
all of
I want
us
a
can do a
theremin. I want
kazoo.
something
I believe
sapphire.
Amy actually
and a
did.
mouth harp.
Mouth harp.
Yeah, Amy did
Oh,
the
yeah.
theme song for the Woods Hole Film Festival on a
Oh,
kazoo.
well, it was
You
more
led-
Cool.
I
You led a whole bunch of
I
filmmakers in
did.
that.
I can share that with you all if you'd like to see 40 filmmakers dancing to kazoo, everyone with a kazoo, and the theme of Jaws.
Oh, it was the theme of
Oh.
Jaws.
And of
Is
course,
that something you're going to do
about-
now, Amy, or shall we wait until after when we all say hello at the end?
I don't know. I think that might need a few margaritas or something.
I think we later Feedback Friday.
Well, it's
Feedback
evening
Friday,
somewhere.
Black Label.
Yeah, well, that's true. 5 o'clock someplace.
All
Yes.
right, let's get started.
All right, we should
Well,
meet-
hello, everyone. Can you tell, like, we are so fried
Yeah. It's Friday.
that we're talking about kazoo orchestras and Harry Parch instead of Feedback Friday. But welcome. It is our 18th episode. I can't believe that. We've been doing this for 18 weeks. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our Feedback Friday, where Amy Dufo and I talk to all sorts of wonderful and interesting people about our favorite topic, which is natural dyes and color. So before we start, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys have been amazing. I've seen some of you in the classes we've been holding, get lots of emails. You know, we get to see everyone every week. It's been fantastic. So here we are, and today's guest is Rebecca Burgess. And as I said last week, this is the goddess of Fibershed, and she is coming from the mothership in Marin County. So we are so honored and pleased. Rebecca is a vocationally trained weaver and natural dyer, And she's got a background in education. And about 10 years ago, she just asked this question of herself, what would happen if I just created my wardrobe from about 150-mile radius from where I live? And she was able to find, create, and wear a whole range of incredible, amazing, beautiful clothes. And in this journey, she's began to understand, she helped us begin to understand what the resources are that we have right in our own backyards. And so I think for this moment, where many of us are in some level of confinement or restricted travel, this is an amazing opportunity to kind of just get out and look out your front door and see what you've got. So the first book that Rebecca published was Harvesting Color, which many of you, I'm sure, have a copy of this. It's amazing, and we can put the information as a link. Her newest book, I think, is probably more what she's going to be speaking about, which is really how do you take what you've got in your region and make something of it? Because as we've seen, you know, because botanical colors, we buy almost all of our dyes from overseas. And I have to tell you, the supply chain is so fragile right now. It's things that used to take us 2 weeks to get are taking 6 weeks. It's not just breaking down like in the country of origin, getting into the United States, like FedEx, UPS, all of those guys, they are on the floor. They cannot even keep up with the amount of stuff coming through. And besides, it's this huge carbon footprint. I mean, we're talking about flying stuff in. And I think any of you who've been following the news saw that during the time when we were all confined, really confined, like all the emissions dropped way, 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 way low. So now that we're kind of business as usual, they're starting to go up again. So this has to give you some pause, like how exactly do I as an artisan or us as a company, how do we continue working, and what's the model? Are there opportunities in our backyard? And so Rebecca's going to speak a little bit about that. But one of the things that she established with her inquiry initially was something called Fibershed. And Fibershed is an organization of dyers, producers, and practitioners. And Rebecca's going to give you a much fuller description of that. But right now, there's over 50 fiber sheds established throughout the world. So this has become a real movement. And I have to say, Rebecca is the one to speak about it. And before we get started with her, Amy, you've got just a couple of things that you want to talk about in terms of questions and muting and unmuting.
Looks like everybody's muted themselves. So I was going through. So yep, everybody's all set. It's just, it's time for the goddess to speak from her, from her field of
from the mothership. All right, Rebecca, take it away. Well, please welcome Rebecca Burgess.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Amy and all of the folks here. Oh my gosh, this is hands down the most joyful, I don't know what to call this. It's not really a webinar. It's just a lot of fun. And thank you for keeping it light. That's really important at this time, that we come together in community in the ways that we can. And this is such a great portal, the way you're holding this space for everybody. Thank you. So I think I had chatted with Kathy and Amy about some of your, those of you who are repeat attenders to this space. And I'm going to take a little time today to also throw in some details around those of you who are teachers, or if you're at home with children who you might have some desire to bring these themes to them through your homeschool practice, or if you're a school teacher and you are actually responsible for the education of numerous children, that there's some curriculum I'm going to point your attention to. I'm going to do that at the end. I'm going to start with an overview of some of the work that preceded Fibershed, the organization, and then discuss, really what our major goals here are, or at least in our community, and they seem to be shared values and principles within many communities at this point too. So I'm going to share my screen if that is okay. All right. So as Kathy mentioned, this fiber shed started as an inquiry process, and the inquiry led to this word being coined, fibershed, which is truly, it's analogous to a watershed, it's analogous to a food shed. And I was taught about food sheds from an oyster farmer and a grass-fed and finished beef operator. He had both, and he's a neighbor of mine. And I was sitting down with his wife, Nancy, during a slow food dinner in our community. And, she said, well, what do you think of our food shed? And I was like, oh, like 2007. I was like, I like our food shed. And it really stuck with me that I live in one. I always knew I lived in a watershed because our rain-fed reservoirs on Mount Tamalpais feed our community. And I was very conscious of those reservoirs because I hike through those landscapes, thousands and thousands of acres of watershed that I grew up around. So I'm conscious of the topography of my watershed. I'm conscious of the taste of my food shed and the palate that food shed brings forth in the form of a lot of livestock in these grass-fed systems, oysters, citrus, row crop vegetables. But then this question kept, I think, settling into me more deeply because of my role more as a weaver, as a natural dyer. What is the analogous version of this this commitment to your community, this commitment to your locality, to the biodiversity, to the geomorphology, the rainfall, the soil? How does that express itself, not only in the arc of flavor, but the arc of color? How does it express itself in the arc of texture? So the slow food movement is defined by an arc of flavor. But the slow fiber movement, you could say, is very defined by an arc of color or an arc of texture. And so that exploration, and again, I don't come from a family that necessarily grounded me in these things consciously. This was a journey, and I'm hopeful that my journey, which sometimes feels like I'm carving it out of stone, can feel like it can fast forward others to jettison their lives, careers, thinking, philosophies much farther than I've gone. So the goal here was, to show you the beginnings, and all this happened before Facebook and Instagram. The world's changing so rapidly. I think we can learn from each other so quickly now. So, oh, there's the beep, Kathy. We talked about the little beeps you will hear as I change slides. So I know Heidi Iverson is on today. I don't know if there's others who might be on this map, but in 2010 through 2011, after I had just finished, actually 10 days after finishing Harvesting Color, I was brought into this awareness that my values that I had embedded into that book of natural dyes were clearly not represented in the material culture of my wardrobe. The values that I placed to put food in my refrigerator or my pantry, or the food I grew in my garden, clearly I could tell I was not intrinsically translating those values into the yarns I was using, the clothes I was wearing. So this idea of how do I get really intimate with my region. And so all these people here were the first people, there was all those people to make what we called the 1 year wardrobe, which was a challenge to figure out if I could actually dress myself, underwear, socks, bathing suit, everything from 150-mile radius from my front door, defined by the fiber and the dye and the people. So all of those things amalgamated, precipitated this wardrobe that my body was the test case for this. My body was the guinea pig. I wanted to explore it for myself to find out who's here, what four-legged creatures, what plant species, what people who's on the landscape. All of these people, and again, some of the people you'll see, they might have more renown in their work now. Some of these people really popped into the scene to make their yarn and textile more renowned since we all challenged ourselves to work together. Some people were getting their PhDs in environmental chemistry at UC Berkeley and wanted to take the time to knit while we were doing this wardrobe challenge. Some of those people I met in retirement homes who didn't want any visibility. They just wanted to knit and knit a scarf, and that was it. Some of these people were my mother. Some of these people were my down the street 19-year-old neighbor who ended up at Central St. Martin's School of Design. It wasn't a bunch of people who I went, because again, we didn't have social media. I wasn't going through portals that were predefined. I was just walking the sidewalk, literally going into brick and mortar spaces and talking about my interest and my challenge and trying to find people who had a like interest and wanted to support and build community. So that's how this was defined. My background going into it, as mentioned, what is this arc of color that each bioregion precipitates? And so this is my arc of color for North Central California. It could be much more, the gradient of color is actually much more dynamic than this. These are just some of the plants that I would say are good friends. These are plants that I'm friendly with. I grow, I love, I relate to, I tend. So horsetail, equisetum in the top left, oak gall, Artemisia californica, heteromeles, arbustifolia, Toyon, coreopsis, coffeeberry. This is really a palette of color that's defined by native plants that just grow without any real additional irrigation. And then plants like coreopsis that I grow in a garden that I do add additional water to. So here's just, this is my driveway in Petaluma when I was living there. This is just a little dye workshop I did with a few friends, and we put everything on the concrete and took a picture of it. And so then these are pictures from Harvesting Color, and you can see our friend Paige Green. She's the indefatigable photographer extraordinaire who's traveled with me for 10 years documenting our work, really our community's work. Here's coyote brush. This plant is a plant every rancher wants to get rid of because they want more meadow for their grazing land. So, it produces this very color and light fast yellow, and it's abundant. And I'm not the best hand spinner, but that's my hand spun Corriedale, which is a breed of sheep that does very well. They resist hoof rot very well. They can handle our wet winters and our dry summers. So that's this sheep that's really adapted to the Mediterranean climate well. That's Corriedale wool, hand spun with coyote brush. A lot of Eurocentric agriculture that came after the Spanish colonized California. More of the Western and Central European colonizers arrived, and they brought in all kinds of species from other parts of the world. And eucalyptus was one of them. And this is Cideroxylon, and it was used in windbreaks to keep wind erosion from occurring on the farms. And these species are everywhere. They're on the sides of the freeway. They are abundant. So you're never hurting the species by pruning it. Horsetail has been on the planet, I think, for 360 million years. It used to be the size and the height of, imagine the height of a redwood tree. I mean, it used to be one of these monolithic, huge creatures that would take up a lot of space. And now it's less than the height of my knee. And then I use a lot of species for mordants, so natural mordants. This is a coast live oak, but if you live anywhere in the country, there tends to be some form of tannin that you can get. And the work of Michel Garcia, those of you who've worked with him, he talks about all the different types of tannins, these phenolic compounds that nature makes to defend itself against insects. But in that defense, the chemistry of defense actually ironically creates a chemistry of alchemy and bonding, which is an inverse relationship in the dye pot. And I use the acorn for bread, so the meal I can use to cook with, but when I'm leaching the acorns, that water I use as a mordant. and that binds, it binds a lot of, it binds madder root well to my cotton. Kathy would have a lot more scientific things to say about tannin as a binder. It also is I use it in tandem with potassium aluminum sulfate as well. And those two can do really good things together. And then in that 1-year wardrobe challenge, the thing that I craved, and literally, I don't know, maybe this could help translate the experience, but I don't know if anyone on here has ever tried to eliminate a food from their diet and experienced a craving in their body for, I don't know, sugar, wheat. My body started, and my eyes, my sense organs that were not my taste buds, started to actually crave colors. Like I didn't have, when I challenged myself to this 1-year wardrobe challenge, there was no scaled up indigo projects. In fact, there had been some back to the lander movements in the 70s that tried to grow tropical indigo in greenhouses, but there was no real, I mean, this was back in, when I really started this is 2005. I wasn't seeing this plant. So I was doing all this research, and I found Roland Ricketts in Indiana, and started to learn how he was doing his work. And so I started growing Persicaria tinctoria, which now a lot of people are growing because it can grow in North America quite well. This is the basis for a lot of Stony Creek Colors work and Sarah Bellows' work, of course, Roland Ricketts. And it grows super well in California, not quite as well as it does in the Midwest. But here's a fresh leaf recipe. When I wrote Harvesting Color, for those of you who've read that book, I had just gotten back from studying with Michel Garcia in 2008. I went to he was in Provence at the time, and I learned the fructose recipe, but it was really Michel's recipe. So I ended up using this more toxic recipe in the book, which I think I would admonish everyone now to try to use fructose and lime. There's really great ways to make a fresh recipe, but it's not documented in Harvesting Color because it wasn't appropriate to appropriate his recipe. So fast forward, the colors that I craved, like blue, you can see why. These are the tone of this sweater. This is Toyon. This is a lot of what the 1-year wardrobe challenge looked like. So this is Jean Neer. For those of you who know, she just passed away last year at 105 years old. She sheep ranched at a ranch called Utopia Ranch in Mendocino for 50 years, which means she started raising sheep at age 55. So she had a beautiful career as a school teacher, and then really started raising some of the preeminent colorful merinos. And her breeding stock has influenced so many growers all through California. And this was her second career. And here she's standing next to the youngest member of our 1-year wardrobe challenge, Allison Riley, who was 19. So it was at that time, it was, I think, 19 and 98 years old together, developing this sweater out of a yarn from a sheep named Reba. And Reba was 15 years old, and which is old for a ewe. And this award-winning merino that doesn't have a lot of luster. It absorbs the color of the native plants, and it creates kind of you go into the color. It doesn't shine back out at you, but it's very inspiring. And this sweater helped me understand how to keep my body protected from UV light while keeping airflow so I could work in the indigo field while wearing wool. I don't have a picture of myself wearing it, but I wore this actually all through the summer. And here's another collaboration between Casey Dapp and Robin Lind. And Robin she raises sheep on 10 acres. 65 head of Jacob's sheep, and it was those sheep whose colors produced the sweater. I call that the sweater shirt. I wore this sweater shirt all winter long. It was really the only garment I had for some time that had sleeves. Ironically, the things I craved were blue, sleeves, jeans. It was like, oh, without these things, you kind of just, and underwear that's just kind of soft and normal. Underwear at all, like I really didn't wear a lot of underwear. And I realized you can get away with that pretty well, but the other things that you need, like warmth, there were moments where you kind of do see like, oh, I'm going to risk myself into a space where I could get hypothermia. And even in California, you will die of hypothermia sooner if you're outdoors and you're sleeping outdoors. You'll die of hypothermia sooner than you would die of dehydration. So the 1 Year Wardrobe Challenge brought a couple of other things into my mindset, which is these textiles are shelter. They are intrinsically your first form of shelter. And without them, if you lived outside, if you were forced onto the street, if you were forced out for some reason, who knows, a fire burns your house, you don't have shelter, it is these clothes that truly keep you warm. And in that kind of survival component also came forth. And then what came from that, what ricocheted, was appreciation and reverence. It was like, oh, a sleeve is such a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for these sheep. And when you start having the animals in your community and the people in your community directly responsible for your survival, even though this was self-imposed, it changes your sensibility about what your community is. The judgments and the petty arguments and all the things that come in human communities, there's much less of that when we're dependent on each other. And so I point to that right now in COVID and the disruption of the supply chains and the disruption of the food system and the disruption of the textile system to point to this reality of like, and to the polarization in the country around politics. And I think about what regional economic development really does is it makes us dependent on one another again. And when we do that, there's less argumentation about things that might be more peripheral or superficial. We let those go because we all know we have to tend the soil under our feet. We all know we have to work together. And this really came forward in this particular challenge in a way that still is quite with me. Hazel Flett, she is a shepherdess in Sonoma County. She raises churro and romdale. She came to this land during the Vietnam War. Her community was designed to protect people who were pacifists. And so she has been, I guess you could say, started maybe a little bit as a political exile, but her community is one of their ecologists, marine biologists, very deeply connected to land and place. And Hazel's wool produced a lot of beautiful socks, like the romdales and the churro, very hardy wools that I could wear on my feet, hardy wools I could wear as an outer layer. And here is some extra feed coming to that flock. There's a community that produces the wool. And this piece, oh, Heidi, I'm so glad you're here today. Heidi Iverson's with us today, and she designed this piece. So I wanted to point to, there was this transition or inflection moment after the community came together to help dress me, which we did. We paid people who, we had little stipends. I ran a Kickstarter campaign. No one totally worked for free for this thing. We tried to help people out as much as we can, but there was a certain moment where people started to create their own relationships and their own mini economies together, farmers and artisans. And Heidi made this piece, I believe, with Sally Fox's color-grown sheep. So Sally produces pretty much a merino, a colored flock of merino in the Capay Valley. And this piece is all from Sally's wool. And these are, sorry, this is hand knit, and Sally does have to send her wool. I believe she has to send it to Vermont right now to be milled in the way that is organic and gets her the gauges of yarn that she needs, and then it can be hand knit in our community. So that's how we make clothes. We still have to send, less so now after the economic development we've done in our community to build we have one small mill that we helped and another small mill that's kind of regaining revitalization with the next generation, but we still send a lot of our wool out of the community for milling. Another thing we can do, this is a hand knit sweater by Marley Desward of Bolinas, California. And these are blankets that were needle felted. These are all the colors of the sheep in our community. There's no dye here. This is kind of an example of what we were able to pull off with what we had available to us. We can hand knit, we can felt, but if you see here, there aren't any cut and sew projects to speak of, because getting a refined textile in our community proved to be one of the most complex situations. And I didn't have $30 million to throw at the project. Otherwise, I guess we could have solved for that early on. So here's, again, more color. Again, we can hand knit. These are the colors of the sheep from Robin Lyon's farm, and this is Sally Fox's cotton. This is more of what a lot of people thought I would look like during the 1-year wardrobe challenge. They were like, how do you grow your own clothes? What's that gonna look like? And a lot of people thought it would look like this. It was more refined. Here's the use of hides. Molly Mrzinski, a designer in Oakland who made this piece. This is when the work started to gain traction outside of the 1-year wardrobe challenge. Again, it's people designing, again, the designers infused with this idea of how do I connect with place, and starting to make their own pieces for themselves. And then this question came again of textile. How do you get the whole thing? I mean, yes, we can hand weave. I'm a weaver, I can hand weave, but how do you get textile at the right scale to be able to put in the hands of many cut and sewers? And how do you get the drape just right? So what came to me the most in the 1-year wardrobe challenge was gauge of yarn. Our community had 13 wool mills in 1892. And then by the time the Trans-Pacific Railway came in, the Department of the Treasury documented that all of them were bankrupt and had gone bankrupt because the Chinese labor that was substantiating those mills primarily could not compete with the post-Civil War labor that was exploited African-American labor in the South. And so what that dawned on me was like, textile production in California has a history, we did it, but we could never hold on to it due to forced labor being more available and more oppressed in other parts of the country. And this has just expanded worldwide, as we know. So now it's more expensive to do work in the Southeast than it is to do in Myanmar or Ethiopia. Now you can get cut and sewn textiles out of Ethiopia. There are women working at starvation wages of $26 a month to cut and sew our textiles. And the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have greased the wheels for frictionless capital to move into those locations, build these mills, and exploit people so we can have cheap textiles. So this has been perennially frustrating to me that we continue to allow this to happen and that we continue to feed into this completely toxic system that oppresses. So I was like, okay, how do we rebuild in our community? So Lonnie Estelle is a rancher that had a certain scale of production that allowed us to aggregate her wool. She's in northeastern part of California. We could aggregate her wool and get it through some of these mills that remain in South Carolina and North Carolina. The last remaining scaled up wool processing facility to wash and pin draft wool is Chargeurs in South Carolina. She had enough wool to help us get through there. And by that, we could get a worsted top, and then we could get that spun into a very fine gauge, a 224 we call it, to get into a textile. So we needed enough wool to get through this huge 25,000 pound wool hurdle, get it over the top, get the worsted top, and then we were able to send it to these spinning mills that could give us the gauges that we could then mechanically weave and then get a textile that we could cut and sew. We needed help from many partners to move through those minimums. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars of milling costs, and we didn't have it in our community. But here's the textile we ended up making with her wool. This was in 2017. We also designed with our partners at Point Blue and the Carbon Cycle Institute a carbon farm plan for Lonnie. So Lonnie right now, she practices her carbon farming, which is her restoration of her soil. She's offsetting the effect of 800 passenger vehicles emissions per year. Every year, she's pulling that much additional carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil where her sheep graze. And this is all work she does because we've been able to get price premiums for her wool and incentivize her to restore her soil. And this is what we call a climate beneficial textile. It's a textile that sequestered more carbon than it emitted. And here's Ashley Ava Brock, who's designed that textile. Actually, the slide on the right is GDS Cloth Goods' piece. And we did have a fashion show where all of the designers used climate beneficial wool and showcased what they could do. And a lot of people ask, you know, why did you get involved with the North Face? All this artisanship that you're doing, and then you got involved with a transnational company. And on this group, you know, I could imagine there's that question that would come up. We did involve ourselves very intimately with the North Face, and actually they're incredible partners on this project for us. And yes, I know they make a lot of synthetic material, and it pollutes our marine ecosystems, and I know there's a lot of things wrong with other parts of the supply chain. But I mentioned that for us as a small community to get over the hurdle of getting all that wool scoured at 25,000 pounds, we needed a partner to help us make our cloth. We only needed a few hundred pounds of that worsted top. But by teaming up with the North Face, they helped by buying the remainder of the wool. So they helped leverage this project, and then they made beanies out of the same wool, US supply chain, climate beneficial ranch, and then they marketed it like this. And, you know, we marketed it like that. Well, different, but same essential material. And this has created a huge windfall for our community to be able to have, you know, a textile. It also helped us leverage a capital investment of over $500,000 to build our own weaving mill. So we've built a small weaving mill. It's now kind of under construction again because it's getting its next round of investment. It's halted its current projects. It was running off of Draper looms and Compton and Knowles looms from the 1960s. So anyway, we've slowed down and we're about to revamp this weaving mill as a community. All of this investment in our milling, though, has happened because we've been piloting projects and putting pressure on the system to say, what can we make? And getting capital investments from social impact investors who say, oh, that cloth is beautiful. What would it take you to make it all in your community? And so we're just starting to re-stitch our regional economy back together. But it's really taken these pilot projects to show what is possible. And this is my last slide. This is just to show, you know, really the ethic underneath the underpinnings of all this. So we've mapped 3.1 million pounds of wool is pulsing off California rangelands and croplands every year. 250 million pounds of cotton is pulsing off of our irrigated croplands every year. All of these landscapes have the potential to become carbon sinks. They have the potential to hold and draw down more carbon out of the atmosphere than emits through tillage or through the price of doing business, moving the tractor around, transporting the materials. And that's the work we're trying to do now, because when I came into this Fibershed challenge, I saw a lot of depleted soil. We have lost half the carbon in our grazed rangelands from overgrazing. We have lost 400% of the carbon in San Joaquin Valley soils. We are in dire shape in California. We cannot no longer be, I don't think, in even the next 10 years, the breadbasket for the country until we do major repair work. We've been mining the soil like we've been mining many other things. So the work of a Fibershed, when you start getting intimate with your community, you realize where there's damage. You realize where there's sociological damage, you realize where there's environmental damage, you see where environmental racism exists. So one of the beauties and hurdles of coming home in a material sense, not just physically my body, but making sure my food and my water and my clothes are all traceable, I've learned that we have a lot of deep restoration work to do. And that's what we're up to at our org now, is how do we restore these soils, ameliorate climate change, build more resilience to climate change, build regional economies that support a diverse set of livelihoods for people across a spectrum and gradient of education levels. How do we then also deploy textiles that are biodegradable, that then return to these carbon sinks that we can compost after hundreds of mending attempts. When the clothes are tattered beyond belief, how do they go into the compost and then return back to the soil to keep building that carbon stock? These are the systems and methods that when I'm in front of textile brands, what I'll say is, this is the circular economy. If you wanted to know what it looked like, here you go. So I guess I'll pause. That's a lot of information. Kathy and Amy, do you want me to stop share screen?
Yeah, stop share.
Okay.
Rebecca, thank you. That was incredible. It was thought-provoking, and it was hopeful, and it was like, it's interesting what you were talking about in terms of depletion. But what we're going to do now is Amy's opening up chat. Is that true, Amy?
Yeah, I opened it up.
Chat is open. The last thing I see here is kazoos. So now it's time to ask the big questions, and Amy will moderate. So feel
I
free,
actually have a
guys.
couple questions that came in through email, Rebecca. And I feel like they could actually...
education part, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
I'm
education.
gonna put it in the chat. Okay, go ahead.
And just so you guys know, if you go to the Fibershed, it's fibershed.org, not .com.
Exactly, fibershed.org.
Website, which we have a link for in the RSVP, where you did RSVP. The Fibershed website has so much information on there with, affiliate directories that are, the 50 plus fiber sheds that are all over the world. Like Rebecca's sharing about the kind of educational piece that she has. There's so much information on the blog. You can search anything you want. It's on that website. But so Rebecca, there's a student in Ireland who's on right now, who had emailed that they'd like to investigate whether it's possible to create a local sustainable textile and fashion industry in a small part of Ireland. And, what would you suggest as a framework to begin to do that?
To start, sorry, say the last part again. I was distracted by a huge amount of questions.
I know, don't look over. I promise I'll get those. How would one start in a small town to, to start a fiber shed, or to create framework for creating what you've been talking about?
That's a wonderful question. In today's world, because of the internet and social media, I'm thinking that might be done through two ways. One is conversations, and I mean, even I sometimes would drive the country roads and look for sheep and try to find out like who owns them. I need more wool. So sometimes it's just about putting yourself out there to, unless you have a relationship with agrarians in your community already. It was just, for me, a lot of, again, country drives, trying to figure out who owned what. It was also talking to the land trust in our community. And sometimes there's, farm agencies that are in different, I don't know what the farm agencies would be like in Ireland, but you can sometimes go and ask like, who is raising these animals, and figure it out that way. And then on the design side, if you don't have existing relationships with knitters and designers, there's guilds. There's a lot of people who do, there's weaving guilds. There can be art and fiber guilds. Guilds are an incredible resource if they exist in your community. And then the design schools, bringing students into the project was instrumental. So if you can collaborate with students and farmers, can be really fun. And you can ask them to do a design challenge with you. Let's make socks together. Let's make one single, wherever you are in Ireland, this county is going to make its own endemic hat, its sock, and we're going to document it beautifully and showcase it to the community and to social media, and start building momentum and energy, because the creative journey is very empowering to people. So the energy snowballs.
Could I just make a statement as well? Thank you, Rebecca, for that. Also in England, there's the Bristol Textile Project in Bristol, and Babs Behan is part of that organization, and they've got a website. She has a book out. I'm pretty sure she would be totally open to just sharing knowledge. So we can put that information in there in our what we're going to do is after this we send around a follow-up email, and so you'll get that information in a link there.
So
And there is, Rebecca, there is the South, I think it's called the Southeast England Fibershed with Emma, is it?
Emma, yes.
Yeah.
The affiliate, I can put the affiliates
Yeah.
connection.
And again, on Rebecca's, on the website, there's an affiliate directory that drops down and you can see all the different fiber sheds, which is really exciting.
I'll put
Wherever
it
you are, there's probably a fiber shed. Rebecca, can you talk more about if somebody's living in a more urban environment, you know, how would they be able to either access a fiber shed or start a fiber shed?
Oh, urban communities have so much to offer in that, I mean, even if you wanted to get your hands into the soil, you can do, we've seen coreopsis and indigo grown on fire escapes. There's ways to even get intimate with plant life, but urban communities have an amazing resource called people. And so a lot of farmers often need help. Like I know Sally Fox has often asked, like, look for help weeding her cotton, or, you know, I've needed help harvesting my indigo. Sometimes urban communities getting out into the countryside to actually physically help farmers, which is incredibly needed, can be a super cool experience for building bridges between urban and rural. And then urban, the design schools are generally in urban environments, the colleges, all of the kind of like intellectual building around what design is, what's the circular economy is going to look like. All those conversations are often happening in urban environments. So I found it super helpful when people who have this philosophy of, you know, I care about my region, not just, you know, one part of the urban or the rural, I care about the whole. To be a bridge builder between the two has been, is a super important role that someone in an urban environment can play. Because I find people in urban environments just don't have a lot of sensory experience in ag. And they ask a lot of questions because we've demonized agriculture so much in the culture, I have to say. So it's really great when urban communities start to feel like they want to connect with the rural. So I don't know if that could happen, and if you have time or energy to get into the rural communities. Yeah, bridge building.
And yeah, I think too, like working with universities, you know, that they're so starved for their fashion and textile programs, having these sort of add-ons where they're looking at fiber systems and where their fiber comes from. So you never know what kind of conversation you can start up with everything from your community college to your, you know, four-year college and beyond. Rebecca, do you see a possible future where mills and fiber production return to the US as a way to keep jobs in the Southeast and elsewhere as the country moves away from coal mining and reliance on fossil fuels?
Oh, I love that. Yes. Yes. We just did, if you look on our blog, we have just released 2 reports. We're running a very big program called the Regional Fiber Manufacturing Initiative. We're developing new financial instruments for investment, new engineering specs for designing these mills with high forms of appropriate technology that create efficiencies, that also employ people well. And so as we're doing that in our home community, we were super inspired by the Carolina Textile District. It's a co-op that has a coordinator that can help a brand that wants to do something in the Southeast, like make, you know, if I want to make a green t-shirt, okay, well, I can actually connect with all the supply chain through this coordinator that's part of a larger co-op. And we've gotten this thing, you know, and Eric Henry is an incredible resource in the South to connect people from soil to skin, TS Designs. I think the community in the Southeast is already got so much going for it. There's probably just a few gaps in the system that need to be filled in, and analyzing what those gaps are is the key to solving the problem. Like looking, you know, shining a light. Well, what are we missing? You know, that's always where you start. And our regional fiber manufacturing initiative, last thing I'll say about it, our blogs showcase all of what's going on. We actually have an analysis of all the manufacturing that's left. We have Google pins on all the systems that are left. So you can see what the US has left. And then you also see the patterns of fiber production in the US. And we've done that analysis in the last month, so it's very fresh. And we anticipate fiber districts that are pan-fibershed oriented, meaning a Pacific Northwest district. Kathy, gets investment to expand whatever, yarn, getting into yarn dyeing, garment dyeing, whatever you want to do, Kathy. I mean, you're poised for investment, in my opinion. There's other entrepreneurs in the Pacific Northwest who are identifying, and we want to build them up into a district. And then the Carolinas and the Southeast will have their district, and the Northeast and New England will have its district. You could see the upper Midwest having a district. The lower Midwest, maybe its own district. These districts will work because if you think about the capital investments, we're talking $30 to $50 million per district. And you're not going to realize that capital on the county scale, but you'll realize it in a multi-state scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's see. Susan, hi Susan. As a retailer, I'm trying to reach out to local people to supply our store with local goods. I'm finding it difficult to find goods that are wholesale. Knitting yarn is far ahead of cloth, so how do we make it easy for retailers to buy from local producers?
Perennial challenge point. It's such a great endeavor, and I would just say keep trying, keep finding the partner, even if it's one farmer that you find who you can collaborate with. Maybe your margins on the farm yarn start a little lower than your margins on other things, could be. I know that's hard because retail is so tricky, but some of the reasons why the farm yarn is so pricey is sometimes it's due to our mills throughput. We're doing these small batches, and so the prices are rather high, but when we have more textile districts that can efficiently move product through, I think your retail space could be bundled, could be completely full of locally grown goods. But until that time, it's kind of a dance to figure out which mills will give you a finished yarn price that still allow you to make your retail margin. So it might just take a little investigation about what mill that you could help a farmer connect with. If the farmer is already connected to a mill, again, trying to figure out an artful negotiation that might not be as slam dunk as the normal ways of doing business. So be open to maybe agreements that look a little different. I don't know if that's super helpful. I don't know all the details, but
yeah. I know, I remember at Tolt Yarn and Wool, they had, I'm not going to say it right, Snoqualmie, is that how you say it, Kathy? Snoqualmie yarn. They had tried to create a new system where they actually, the owner's driving by a field, there's sheep in the field, they realize that they're throwing away the wool, like how do I get the wool pelts? And then they created this whole kind of great collaboration between the two where they could make the Snoqualmie Valley yarn based on what this farmer was throwing away and then creating that system to support it from there.
That's another way to do it, is find the lower hanging fruit wool that isn't maybe being a hand spinner price, like finding the wool that might be more like $2 a pound, $2.50, like in our community. That's still a really good price for wool that had no market prior.
Yeah. Samantha Verone is asking a question, who's our next week's Feedback Friday. Love how you got a major clothing manufacturer to be part of the solution. Do you know about the cotton industry here? I was able to get 100% organic, American grown, loomed finished cotton from one local source, but no longer have that relationship. We definitely need a global economy of local businesses. And thank you for your wonderful work, she says.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's going on with cotton? Talk about that.
Well, cotton is undergoing a revolution on the ag side right now. We're in the midst of great change to help cotton become climate beneficial, move it towards a regenerating system. So farmers need transition dollars. They need cotton to be a little higher priced than these commodity prices. So like, for instance, I think farmers were getting 58 cents a pound during COVID. And I think those prices still exist. when I talked to the local farmer in Merced County, he says he will still not be getting the cost of production covered, let alone his own profit to live off of, to put food on his table. $1.50 a pound is what he needs just to keep people paid in the field responsibly at $15 an hour. So the thing is, California, for instance, in cotton systems for us, we're trying to pay people living wages. And that's very distinctly different from what's going on in other parts of the world in cotton systems. It's going on in pockets in other parts of the world, but the ubiquitous nature of cotton is it's often hand-picked. To get that organic certification, you often have some pretty nasty labor things you have to contend with, unless it's fair trade certified and organic. But even the certifications can, unless you know the farmer, you can walk into some holes there. So I would say with cotton, the woven cottons, someone here might even have a better solution, but I know for knits, I've watched the real growth of Lydia Wendt at California Cloth Foundry. I know that Sally Fox, I don't know what your scale is, but she has some I believe she has woven textile on her website right now. And then at scale, a domestically grown, I don't know where the West Texas Co-op might have its cotton what it's being turned into, or if it's wholesale available, but that's another co-op that I know some artists have worked with to get their own textiles produced using the West Texas Organic Cotton Co-op as a source. Yeah, knits from California Cloth Foundry are the things that I've been using for some of my dye practice, and I've been using Sally Fox's textile as well. Mm-hmm. Amy, Kathy, do you know of any wovens?
I'm just trying to think. U.S. grown. Rebecca, kind of a larger question quickly, is cotton ink at all involved with the sustainability and organic farmers ever, or are they still doing their GMO is best?
Like Kathy's dropping a bomb and walking away.
Oh no! I push back on the GMO thing. The problem is there is a Hazara breed that's being grown that's not GMO that we have access to in California, and we're sending, that's Lydia's next purchase is Hazara. But I tell you, we worked for 2 years to try to find a non-GMO seed. I mean, this is a huge issue in this country, that our seeds have been completely like piracy, basically. Like, they're going to take all the genetic material, these conglomerates, and pump you out with what they can give you, which has a suicide gene in it. You can't collect that seed and plant it the next year. It's Roundup ready. Oh, it's a mess. There's a few seed purveyors we found, but oh my gosh. So we're in transition, Kathy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd like to get out. We'd like to kick GMO to the curb.
But for wovens, U.S. There's some guys in.
Houston Textile.
No, these guys. This is a commercial mill. There might be an organic provider out of South Carolina, but they may no longer even, be in existence. So.
Houston Textile will have wovens again, but it's probably, they're going to go through a little period of doing knits, and then they're going to look for the investment to modernize weaving. It might take 18 more months before we see West Texas woven through Houston.
Yeah, it's super difficult because the organic market for cotton is really coming from other countries. And even though the U.S. used to be the 3rd largest producer of cotton in the world, 99.9% of that is GMO, commercial, not organic. So we're really trying to search and find it and support those that are moving in that direction.
One of the things I like about you, Rebecca, though, is you've always been able to meet farmers where they're at, and where other people want to turn their backs on the conventional cotton farmers, you're willing to work with them and help educate them, because they're just doing what they know, and they don't know.
Well, they educate me too. I mean, I think the education is really informative to meet someone where they are and let them tell you, that this is my whole career, And so it's, you know, to have a production-centered conversation is where I think we need to go. Who's producing it? Why are they producing it this way? What's the history? Oh, you mean they were producing organic in California and then a few brands decided, I won't name names, that like organic California cotton was using water in a way that they didn't like. So then they went overseas, all of our growers went GMO. And so we actually have the brands to thank for some of the economic parameters that farmers faced in the 90s and made, you know, some decisions to basically backslide. And so now brands come to me and they're like, we want organic cotton. And I'm like, you know, now they're going to have to the farmers have to dig themselves out of this, because it's really a transition to go from a conventional field to an organic field. And if no brand is willing to hold the economic hand to say, I'll help you transition, guess what we get? We get 99, we keep having the same story. 99.9% of the cotton is GMO and conventional, while, you know, 0.01% or 1% is organic. Everyone's chasing organic, but the real challenge is the transition. Because if we want to transition acres and clean the system up, we have to actually do work at the point of the farmer that needs and is willing to transition with us. They're actually all willing to transition in California, but no one's willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm just like, oh, we got to figure out, like, you know, what we're willing to pay for. I think that's what'll eventually turn the tide.
Right. Well, we are at our end time right now. You know, there might be a couple questions that Rebecca might want to answer by email that I can add to the post. It's up to you, Rebecca. We can talk about it after. I will tell you guys, I just heard from Tilka, who did Wild Pigment Project last week. I just got all the questions that you asked her last week, and I'll be loading them onto last week's Feedback Friday post, just as a heads up, if you want to go back. But Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us and inspiring us, and for having so much information too for us to we can wrap our brains around. You know, look for the Fibershed that's in your area based on the Fibershed website. If you're in the Northeast where I am, I run a Fibershed, and we have a whole Northeast Fibershed up here, like 6 states. So you can hit me up if you live in New England. But we are so appreciative of you. And Kathy, I know you probably have some things you want to say too to Rebecca.
Rebecca, it's absolutely wonderful to have you come and talk to us, like, in such, just, you know, you've spent so much time thinking about this and coming up against all of these challenges and figuring out solutions or ways around it or other alternatives. I mean, wow, we're so pleased to hear, like, there is a total infrastructure opportunity for us to completely transform. And you've written a roadmap with this book. So you guys, it's on the site. We've got it. Buy it. It's absolutely amazing. A lot of the questions you're asking of how do I get there are in here. Okay. So you don't need to buy it from us, but you need to buy this book. So this is a good one to have. Because it just helps you think, oh, you know, a lot of us have this intuitive understanding of it, but we don't actually have the tools. This gives you the tools. So this is, I really want, you know, for those of you who are really wanting to invest in how do I get there, this is the book to start that inquiry. So please buy it. All right? Support that. And then I just want to talk about a couple other things for next week. We're really pleased to welcome Samantha Varone, who's going to be speaking about her journey with rust dyeing and the influences of Japanese boro textiles on her work, and how she's taking discarded textiles and creating something different and new from them. The other thing I just wanted to speak of is we're going to be opening up a class on natural dyeing with Porfirio Gutierrez, who those of you who were a few Feedback Fridays ago That'll be on August 21st and 22nd. And so that'll be, hopefully I'm getting it this weekend. We'll have it open and available. It'll be a Zoom training. He'll be broadcasting from Cattywampus in Ojai and joining us via that beautiful space. And so we're really excited. But lots of food for thought here, you guys. We're in the middle of this crazy period. And this is such a beacon of, oh yeah, I can kind of get out of my funk and figure out ways that I can help my community and get myself on a path, because we've just been in a holding pattern for what, 18 weeks now. So let's get moving. All right, shall we unmute and say goodbye? I just want to thank everybody again. This was an amazing presentation.
Yeah, thank
Rebecca,
you
thank
so
you
much, Rebecca.
again. It was incredible.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Bye, everybody.
Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Kathy, thank you for such an incredible.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Hi, Breeze.
Honey Pepper.
Thank you. Thank you.
My back.
Hi, Elaine.
Bye. More inspiration. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Elaine.
Oh, Diane Becker's here.
Hi, Sarah.
We got, whoa, is John Duke still here?
I don't know. I see LED.
Where's LED? Oh, I see LED.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. There's John,
Where's John?
right there.
John Duke!
Oh, look at this beautiful indigo from Susan. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, I was telling Rebecca about your vermicomposting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
The worms rule.
worms rule.
They'd eat some of those, actually, well, you know, Amy, because the coffee bags I put in there, the jute coffee sacks, and the worms just gobble them right up.
Yeah. It's got like just stockpiles of coffee. What is it called? Like the chaff or something from the.
It's coffee chaff. It's a byproduct from the roasting process.
He has mountains of it in his backyard, and it just smells like fresh brewed coffee.
Ooh,
Out there into the woods.
that sounds delicious.
Like
All right.
an NPR kind of thing. Like, sounds delicious.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. Kathy and sorry, can I say one thing?
Yeah,
Amy?
yeah. Right here.
I just speaking about